Welcome to GovFocus. I'm Henry Kenyon, Senior Staff Writer with GovCIO Media and Research. Joining me today are Gabe Chuley, Acting Army Chief Information Officer, Kevin Walsh, Director of IT and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office, and Christopher Yates, Principal Chief Architect at Red Hat. Thank you all for joining me today. Today, we'll discuss how Agentic AI is reshaping federal operations from mission support to service delivery. We'll discuss governance, risk management, and real-world cases, highlighting what agencies need to adapt Agentic AI responsibly and at scale. So for starters, I'd like to ask all of you, starting with Gabe, what is the promise of Agentic AI? What can these tools offer to federal agencies that software and generative AI tools can't?
Thank you. It's a good question. So agentic I think we call it a promise. I call it a hope, but um, we're actively looking at seeing how agentic AI can get implemented inside the Army. Right? There's various areas where you can say there's 101 kind of office productivity stuff where it's like I've got a person that I would be teaching to do an activity, and I want to see how I can apply that agentic AI to that capability. And then we're also kind of monitoring of how do I actually scale this across the Army in a cost effective manner, right? Because we are 1.3 million people across the board that we have to be cost conscious of how we go and implement that. But I think the promise of agentic AI is going to be big, and we're going to have to be conscious of the idea of we're going to have to start looking at how do we delegate that risk decisionia, if you will, some of that risk determination down to different organizations, down to commands to say, look, if it's got a no threat nexus on what that agentic AI is doing, that's okay. Let that person at that level make the determination of what that agentic AI is doing. And then at certain levels, kind of say, hey, there's certain stuff we're not going to just automatically allow agentic AI be applied to, and we're going to have governance behind those different pieces on how that agentic workflow kind of gets applied.
So I think agentic AI has a lot of promise in the government, right? Uh, the government in general has a lot of legacy debt, a lot of technology debt, a lot of things that could be improved or maybe should be improved. And I think agentic AI starts to get us towards that. Now, to me, agentic AI is something of a spectrum. The agentic aspect of it is how in charge of decisions something is, right? If it's in a closed environment, then it's on the less agentic side of things. If it is in a open environment operating with more uncertainty or over longer durations, longer time frames, then it is perhaps more agentic. Um, but I do think that there is plenty of opportunity. I think a lot of promise for AI. We just need to watch out for the other side of the sword, the peril or the risks here that we automate things that we don't want necessarily automated.
I see that the promise is that we're going to have increased autonomy and we're going to accelerate speed. We're going to have predictability in our solutions and we're going to have safety of the management and control of our systems.
Mhm.
Traditional software is static, and generative and agentic AI deliver more dynamic, flexible options. Generative AI may allow you to scan a large corpus of knowledge at machine speed and answer questions about the underlying evidence and facts. But there's still a human engaged in the process, a human that can't read 10,000 words a minute, a human that can't respond in milliseconds. As adversaries and bad actors leverage generative AI to accelerate attacks, we need to be able to defend against these attacks at the machine speed.
And to move on to Kevin, what are some of the governance issues and challenges with agentic AI? What are some of the things CIOs have to look out for?
It's a fascinating discussion, especially since right now I feel like technology is perhaps getting ahead of the actual governance that's out there and available. I'd highlight four things that I think we would want to keep an eye on with governance. First and foremost, I think AI creeping in or being shadow IT, getting into these organizations where the governance may not really be there yet. So I think that is, perhaps emblematic of some of this issue where vendors are pushing AI into software and into offerings that traditionally don't have them. For example, Copilot. How many computers in the government have Microsoft Word on them that now all of a sudden have a large language model attached? being able to keep track of and inventory and know where all these extra capabilities are and which capabilities you want to use and which you may not want to use is going to be important going forward. The second thing would be auditability. I'm an auditor. I'm very interested in documentation. I tell my kids that my job is to double check, double check what people are doing and make sure they're doing the right thing. And if you can't audit something, if you don't have documentation, then how do you prove why you did the thing you did? So that's increasingly important with AI. Accountability. There's an old saying that a computer cannot be held accountable for a decision. And so if computers are making decisions, how do you ensure that if something, doesn't go the way you want, that you can correct it and hold people responsible for that if they didn't really make the decision. And the fourth and final thing would be keeping an eye on irreversible actions and putting guardrails around them. If a computer is going to be making an irreversible decision, then we should really be making sure that as best as we can, that there are guardrails, human in the loop or human in the know somehow. But the cybersecurity discussion and the ongoing developments that were mentioned earlier in cybersecurity and responding at machine speed are going to be increasingly challenging to have those guardrails in place. If the bad guys are using cyber, as we've seen over the past few weeks, there was an article from Anthropic a little while ago about how nation state actors were using agentic AI to conduct their cyber attacks. If the bad guys are going to use it, the good guys really are going to be forced to respond at that same speed and use those same tools. So figuring out what guardrails we want and how they come into play is going to be critical.
Gabe, moving over to you. The Army has been a leader in deploying AI. Can you tell me a little bit about Project ARIA and other AI use cases?
Yeah. So the Secretary of the Army has been really a leader in trying to push AI and how we look at problem sets in the Army and really transform kind of our interaction with really like taking on the next level of technology. Project ARIA was kind of a moonshot effort kicked off by the Secretary of the Army, and a couple of different areas came out of that. I'll kind of go through two of them just right off the bat here. One of them was how do we really get AI to look at both from the enterprise level down to the edge. Doing enterprise level AI is actually kind of a lot easier because you got like enterprise delivery from SaaS providers and then sort of enterprise delivery of just major frontier AI models. But getting that same experience or same capability, or at least a like capability down to the tactical edge is really difficult, especially, at the tactical edge, it's the warfighter. All he needs to be able to do, or we want him to have to do, is go warfight, not worry about how to set up containers and doing all this technical whiz. So, the secretary and the DUSA, they said, hey, I want to make it so the warfighter is able to reach into his weapon inventory and pull out his weapon and be able to go warfight, right? And in that idea, we came up with this concept of the model armory. Maybe a pun intended, but the idea really is to have it so a model kind of formulated potentially up in the enterprise level or even down at the tactical level is able to be very quickly by a user. I come up with a concept of what they want that model to do. They kind of tell it, generally speaking, what the hardware looks like, and it kind of takes that blueprint and deploys it. And a lot of this work was because we worked with some of the industry partners in the frontier labs and some of the big AI companies out there, and really told them what the problem set was and let them come to the table on some solutions. And then us kind of really getting together and saying, okay, how can we implement this in real time and really get after these really, really hard problem areas. The second is application of AI into our logistics world, right? The depots and the OIB, looking at those areas and saying, hey, if we want to make a real true digital twin of our depot and be able to see as active inventory is being looked at from like how is it moving, how much do we use, are we able to be predictive about when a vehicle or when a piece of equipment needs to be refreshed, or when equipment needs to be, or when parts need to be ordered for that equipment to be refreshed, and really using AI to get after and drive modernization of our OIB. So I think those are two kind of predominant areas. And then we have other areas where we've just taken just high level approaches of deploying AI across the enterprise, which is, I don't want to have people that are suffering trying to like getting a transcript of a meeting made or creating a MFR in the right exact format, and make an enterprise level kind of tool so that they can get after those very quickly without very low level of effort, get after it, start trying out the tools, and make it carte blanche available to the masses so that they can come with that new aspect of how AI can be used, and provide their commands, provide their leadership with ideas of how to really implement AI into the greater force.
I really like that idea or that discussion of, it almost applies like a risk tolerance for what we should use AI for, right? Like for certain low risk activities, fantastic, right? Hey, getting a memo in a format or transcribing a meeting, cool. Well, let's rubber stamp some of those and get them through. It's the higher risk activities where we get towards those decisions that maybe we can't take back, uh, that I'd love to see the discussion of the guide rails on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we are trying to hopefully approach this, the evolution of AI and the evolution of those different pieces to say we acknowledge that we're going to have to put that governance framework in as those problem areas become more risk, more intentional. How do we apply those different areas? But trying to make sure that everybody has an opinion, is actually very well educated on how AI is used, is really, really important to us up front.
Right.
Mhm.
You want to realize the promise without, basically, slowing up the train, except when it makes sense, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I always look at it in the sense of, if I asked you, Kevin, hey, I want you to make a determination of if I should use AI in this area, I want you to be able to smartly talk about, okay, this is how AI actually works and how it can actually impact whether it's a determination or non-determinative kind of workflow, and that way, as we go through our workforce or across the army, people really realize how AI kind of actually does work, versus kind of just saying, oh, I don't like AI, so I'm not going to let it be part of my workflow, because they may not know what it looks like. So that empowerment of greater use, give them general ideas of how it works, and then helping formulate different moonshots, if you will, of how we can really implement it in different areas.
Right. And the president's executive orders have given, some terminology around this. High impact systems, I think is what they call it.
Yep.
But yeah, it'll be fascinating. You're where the rubber meets the road. So seeing how that works out or doesn't, and figuring out what to do in the edge cases is going to be critical.
Chris, what steps do organizations need to take to get the best out of agentic AI tools and to avoid unpredictable outcomes with them?
So, first, we've mentioned it several times, but they need guardrails in place. They need to be able to identify if a solution is going to be destructive or unrecoverable, and then route that appropriately. They need well architected, mature authentication and authorization IAM policies to deliver least privilege agency. We want to ensure that the agents that are allowed to operate on specific inventories and perform certain actions, we want to be able to ensure that agents that are allowed to perform certain activities on inventories of systems are prevented from performing outside of those bounds. We need ephemeral credentials and dynamic secrets to ensure that while the agent is able to execute its task, that once that task is done and the audit chain has been created, that it cannot go back in. No one can steal those credentials and reuse them. They've been expired very quickly. And then the move from generative AI's probabilistic and statistical outputs to deterministic outputs is really part of what we need to look for to deliver predictable outcomes. And I think that these can be delivered with a couple of different existing things. So we already have ephemeral authorization that's widely available. We've discussed here a few times human in the loop and human on the loop. So, that there is a kind of fuse there where the human can be brought in if the breaker trips. Human on the loop, how do we understand what the system has done? How did it determine its solution, and what did it do? And is it within its bounds? That brings us to immutable audit chains. That's pretty much how we are able to create that audit. And then we need policy as code to ensure that our highly regulated environments are being changed automatically by our agents in a way that allows us to maintain compliance. Another component we need is risk-based routing and confidence thresholds. So we mentioned this earlier. As as an agent develops a solution, what is the blast radius of that? How many systems is it going to impact? And what is the negative impact if it's done incorrectly? Like if we bring down the point of sale system for a large retailer, they can't sell anything, and that's kind of their whole business. So that would be a high risk. And then the last thing we need is we need agents that are able to monitor our agents, because our agents are operating at machine speed. They need to be reviewed at machine speed as well. So all of these things together kind of bring together what we need to look for to be able to trust our agentic systems as we build them in the near future.
I really want to highlight
ahead.
one thing that Chris said there. You know, much of what he's describing is not new or revolutionary. It's evolutionary, right? Or it's applying, our standard tools to this new capability. Zero trust is the thing in the government, right? We, least privilege access, but thinking about applying it to our own computer systems and to these agents that may be able to operate independently on their own is important. And when we're going to elevate that access, I love the idea of just making sure that it's tightly constrained and time limited. So yeah, this is what we're going to be dealing with in the future.
And as a final question to all of you, starting with Kevin, what agentic AI tools or capabilities will CIOs need to be on the lookout for in the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh man, agentic AI has come a long way just in the past 6 months alone. So it's hard to get out the crystal ball. I'd say mine's full of mud or other detritus. But looking forward, I mean, wherever we have great data on why decisions were made, and the government does have some unique use cases which are going to be, a change for the private sector to be able to look at. And we're sitting here with Gabe, who definitely has some very unique non-private sector use cases in his organization. But if we have just data on why decisions were made the way they were, or guidance that goes there, I think that's a great candidate for agentic AI. Um, where it gets a little, further with AI kind of getting over the skis of the governance is where there's less certainty, but that's actually where agentic AI can actually make an attempt. But Chris was talking about moving from, you know, hallucination-based AI decision making to more deterministic, and that doesn't really jive well with how these current large language models were developed and built. So in 6 to 12 months, I would love to see us figure out that deterministic angle or to get better certainty out of AI agents. I hope we get there. I'm not sure we will.
You know, AI, as Kevin just stated, it's come a long way, and even like the last, I'll even shortcut it the last 3 months. And it is definitely very hard to keep track of where we are in the world of in the scheme of things. Um, I'm personally looking forward to get that. I mean, everybody's heard this, the groundbreaking open claw, right? That is in essence where I think will be kind of some of the next things that we're going to try and get out there into the workforce in smaller scales. I think up front, I think it'll be a very interesting kind of mixture of saying, how do I implement what Chris Yates just kind of mentioned, which is I have to apply zero trust to how the model is able to interact with our data, making sure it has limitations to how it can access both data and what things it can reach and all those different pieces. And then on the kind of flip side is you're treating it kind of like, in a sense, is like a I won't say the intern, but it is kind of like an intern that you've hired that happens to know everything about anything if you ask it the right question, right? And so when you say bringing something on board like that, and you say, hey, I want to be able to bring this and give it access to our data, our networks, you really do want to make sure that as you implement things that, and the technology behind it's really called agentic loops. And what that does is it starts being able to say, hey, I'm going to ask a question, and it kind of thinks about the question and thinks about different ways to get after the problems. How do I introduce that in a way that is protective of both our data, both, what kind of decision it gets applied to? So it's part of governance from a technical perspective, and governance from, as Kevin was talking about earlier, of what is it that we really think the risk is if it is making a determination. Like if I'm asking it to make a PowerPoint presentation, probably risk's low. I'm just making a presentation and I have a little less, human tech debt to throw at that problem area. But then when you start applying it to more high risk problems is where we'll start having to say, hey, does this meet our government thresholds or governance thresholds, and would I want to apply AI into? I think the other area that we're going to see a lot more implementation of AI is going to be in small language models. Much more small factor models that are built for probably more on the compute side of like the hardware you have on your desktop or in one of those areas. And I think it's kind of multifold of saying, hey, that's kind of a tactical implementation, but that's all a person needs on a very localized basis to say, I want to be able to do something, get some input, and kind of help me along versus the consistent grind of some of the much larger models, excuse me, and how those will kind of continue to evolve at a very, I think it's like a 3-month pace that we're seeing these models kind of develop. And then on my side, we got a lot of maturing to do across. We maintain 3 to 4 different networks in our classified regions and the higher classification regions. So trying to make sure that parity of capability is continuously being elevated to those different areas where the mission impact continues to be greater and greater.
I look at traditional artificial intelligence, which uses institutional knowledge and private training, and it's very expensive. If we look at the frontier models, some of them a year ago used about $20 million in compute to be able to just build the model. So, as we move forward into this new age, we're going to see things as a service. And I don't mean hosted on a cloud service provider, but rather, models as a service. I might want to perform the same task multiple times with different models. I want to have tools as a service. I might want to have a tool harness that I can connect that will allow me to test this in a sandboxed environment before I then give it access to the tools that run in production. I want skills as a service. We're delivering skills to agents on demand, and that's going to be something that is going to be provided and sold across the industry. And then lastly, agents as a service. What does the agent do? What is the workflow for the agent, and how does it provide the capability that it's set to deliver? I think all of these are frameworks that we're going to see being delivered here in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think that they're going to be foundational in our ability to leverage this technology to deliver on its promises.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. This was really interesting.